Thank you for standing by. This is the conference operator. Welcome to the K92 Updated Kora Resource and Maiden Judd Resource Conference Call. As a reminder, all participants are in listen-only mode and the conference is being recorded. After the presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. To join the question queue, you may press star then 1 on your telephone keypad. Should you need assistance during the conference call, you may signal an operator by pressing star and 0. I would now like to turn the conference over to David Medulik, Vice President, Business Development and Investor Relations. Please go ahead.
Thank you, operator, and thanks everyone for attending K92 Mining's updated Kora Resource and Maiden Judd Resource Estimate Conference Call. We hope you and your families are doing well. In addition to myself, we have on the line John Lewins, Chief Executive Officer and Director. I would also like to remind everyone that after the remarks from management, the call will be followed by a Q&A session. As we will be making forward-looking statements during the call, please refer to the forward-looking and cautionary statements on page 2 of the resource estimate presentation, which can be found on our website at k92mining.com. Additional risk disclosure statements are also found in our MD&A. Also, please bear in mind that all dollar amounts mentioned in the conference call are in United States dollars unless otherwise noted. Now, I'll turn the presentation over to John.
Well, thanks, David. We're obviously very excited to be presenting our updated resource estimate for Kora and Maiden resource estimate for Judd. It's a major milestone for K92 and sets us up well going forward. In the presentation, I'm going to cover 5 areas: the resource estimate highlights, Kora deposit updated resource estimate overview, Judd deposit maiden resource estimate overview, production expansion plans and resource growth, and then close with questions and hopefully answers. So, as I mentioned, we're very pleased with the outcome of the resource estimate on so many levels. Firstly, we exceeded our measured and indicated target of 2 million ounces, which feeds into the Stage 3 definitive feasibility study, reporting 2.3 million ounces at strong grade of 9.29 gram per ton on a combined Kora and Judd basis. Measured and indicated increase of about 110% from the April 2020 resource estimate, and important to remember that this is net of 18 months of depletion, where we've mined 182,000 ounces at 16.33 gram per ton from Kora, that's gold equivalent, and 25,000 ounces at 12.2 gram per ton gold equivalent from Judd, and almost entirely from measured and indicated. We add those ounces back in, and 2.5 million ounces, 9.8 gram per ton gold equivalent. Secondly, the inferred resource continues to be very significant, with a combined Kora and Judd resource, 2.6 million ounces at very solid grade, 9.05 gram per ton gold equivalent. Important to remember that our conversion of inferred to measured and indicated historically has been very high. Thirdly, high grade at both Kora and Judd is extensive. We'll go over the grade tonnage curves and tables later in the presentation, but I've given a preview here that illustrates the high-grade operational flexibility of both deposits. And we'll certainly look to leverage that in the upcoming economic studies. Fourth point, over 4 years of mining, that significantly reduced the resource and mining risk. Previous resources have delivered a positive reconciliation largely on grade. The updated Kora resource depletion versus actual shows a 7% positive reconciliation. Very encouraging going forward. I think it's also important to note the updated resource was estimated by the same consultant that we've used for the last 2 resources, updating some of the parameters and only slightly refining them. Fifth point, there's extensive exploration upside potential. Both deposits are open in multiple directions, and after 18 months of infill drilling for the updated resource, drilling will now focus far more on resource growth. Drilling is currently underway at Kora, Kora South, Judd, Judd South, and also at the Blue Lake Porphyry. K92 is a world-class asset with a world-class resource. Later in the presentation, we'll present a peer analysis completed by BMO of the plus 5 million ounce gold equivalent systems that show K92 ranks among some of the best in the world. So before we start to present the individual resources for Kora and Judd, we'll provide a consolidated basis resource table for your reference. For the first time, measured and indicated are almost equal to inferred. In addition to Kora and Judd, we've also got the Aruma Fimpa deposit, which currently isn't being mined, however, will be at some point in the future. In terms of where these deposits are situated, looking to the west long section, you can see Aruma Fimpa, which is to the north on the right side. It's a low sulfidation system that quite abruptly transitions into an intermediate sulfidation system, which is Kora. And then you've got Judd running subparallel to Kora and to the east of it. So now moving on to discuss specifically the Kora deposit and its resource estimate. So we'll start by perhaps giving some background on the deposit. We've been mining Kora since October 2017, and we've established a strong understanding of the deposit through extensive underground development, plus production stoping from both cut and fill and long hole stoping. Deposit is an intermediate sulfidation system with a resource including K1, K2, and Kora Link, although there are also additional veins such as K3 and K2 hanging wall that require further drilling. The deposit is high grade, and importantly, it has the right ingredients for successful underground mining. Subvertical, solid thickness, high continuity, efficient access, competent grind conditions, and to date has delivered a positive reconciliation versus the previous resource models of over 10%. Importantly, from a metallurgical perspective, we've seen recoveries of over 92%, for both gold and copper, and potential to take it up to 95 at a relatively coarse grind of just over 100 micron. And using flotation, we're producing a high-grade, high-quality copper-gold concentrate. We've just commissioned our gravity circuit. We're now producing doré as well, and that will also be incorporated into the new plant, with about 10 to 30% of our gold expected to be recovered through gravity. Looking at the operational performance, you can see that all those positive factors have translated into strong production results. Even with the headwinds from the COVID-19 pandemic, we've continued to grow production and reinvest cash flows to expand the operation. As noted earlier, Kora has consistently delivered a positive reconciliation just about every quarter, and that's largely driven by grade. This is the third resource estimate that's been completed by Simon Tier of H&S Consultants, and in each estimate, the resource assumptions have been slightly refined from the last estimate. The geological model is based on a 3D wireframe with a 0.1 to 0.2 gram per ton cutoff and a minimum mining width of 5.2 meters. Ordinary kriging is the interpolation method. Classification search parameters are largely unchanged, except the X radius for the inferred, which was increased from 8 to 12 meters. Based on additional data, top cutting was increased for Kora Link to 400 gram per ton from 150 gram per ton, and density reduced by 3% for K2 and for Kora Link, and 5% for waste. Cutoff for the resource has been changed to 1.75 gram per ton from the previous 1 gram per ton, and that's to better align it with our long-term economic cutoff grades. The updated resource estimate has an effective date of 31st of October 2021, measured and indicated now standing at 2.1 million ounces at 9.2 gram per ton, which is an increase of about 90% from the prior Kora resource. Inferred remains significant, 2.5 million ounces at 9.5 gram per ton gold equivalent. We're certainly pleased with the high grades in all confidence categories, and as previously mentioned, we've had a very high historical conversion of inferred to measured. In terms of the Kora resource mineral load wireframes, the left image is a long section, middle image is a cross section, and the right image is a plan view of the geological wireframes created for block modeling purposes. You can see K1 there, the cyan, and K2 blue have extensive strike and vertical extents defined by our drilling and underground development, some 1 kilometer in each direction. In terms of resource confidence category, long sections for both K1 and K2 are shown here, and with the block colors corresponding as follows. So red is your measured, indicated as green, and cyan is your inferred. The focus, as I previously mentioned, of the infill drilling program was to upgrade inferred to measured and indicated, and that's really focused on about a 350 to 400 meter vertical extent centered around our existing development and about a kilometer long strike. As K1 is closer to the drill drive than K2, you've got tighter drill spacing, which obviously results in a greater proportion of the resource being measured. The slide shows the cutoff grade versus ounces and tonnage curves from measured and indicated on the left, inferred on the right. Important highlights, I think, are cutoff grade increase. There's a significant drop off in tonnage with a significant increase in grade, but only a moderate reduction in the overall ounces. This is not typical for most deposits. In fact, it's obviously an attractive feature. It's telling us as we increase our cutoff grade, Kora remains substantial in size as a large proportion of the resource is underpinned by a very high-grade core. So presenting this in a tabular form, you can see that just a small increase in the cutoff grade from 1.75 to 2.5 gram per ton increases the grade by approximately 20%. But reduces the ounces by less than 10%. If we move to a 5 gram cutoff, grade increases to over half an ounce per ton, but still with a substantial 1.5 million ounces of measured and indicated and 1.6 million ounces of inferred. This implies that Kora has significant potential for operational flexibility to access high-grade mining areas, and visually we'll show this over the next couple of slides. So here, if we look at the long sections, both K1 and K2 are well mineralized, kilometer vertically, kilometer along strike. When we drill Kora, we're essentially grid drilling a vein system as essentially all of our drill holes intersect mineralization. And that's evidenced by the resource covering such a large area. The long section also shows very large, discrete areas of high grade that you can see there. The extensive high grade areas imply significant long-term operational flexibility, as previously mentioned, for mine design and planning purposes. And again, it's open along strike and at depth. The next slide, we're showing a cross-section of the Kora resource looking north. It covers about 160 meters vertically and includes K1, K2, and the Kora link veins. In the area where these three are present, there's a potential for bulk mining, and this is something that we're going to be looking at as part of our Stage 3 definitive study. Now, moving on to the Judd deposit and Maiden resource estimate. The Judd deposit is located 150, 200 meters east of Kora. It's very similar in geology and it's high grades. The resource is based on the J1 vein, but there are at least three other veins which are known, and that will require additional drilling. Judd is a recent addition to our mine plan. Long hole stoping commenced in fourth quarter of last year and has performed well. Very competent geotech, solid thickness, high continuity, and high efficiency in drill and blast. Our largest single blast was completed here last quarter, but over 4,000 tons. Very efficient to access because we're leveraging Kora's infrastructure to access, so only limited waste development. Metallurgically performs very, very similar to what we see in Kora, and so commingling at the plant is not an issue. So the Maiden Judd resource estimate, given its similarities to geology at Kora, has taken a very similar approach, employing a 3D wireframe 0.1 to 0.2 gram per ton cutoff, minimum mining width of 5.2 meters, ordinary kriging as the interpolation method, and same search parameters for measured, indicated, and inferred as Kora. A top cut of 40 gram per ton has been applied, and a slightly lower density, 2.71. Maiden resource estimate, 130,000 ounces, 11 gram per ton for the measured and indicated, 180,000 ounces, 5.6 for the inferred, both at a 1.75 gram per ton cutoff. Effective date, 31st of December 2021. And as I think we've mentioned previously, we only pivoted from Kora to Judd in Q4. So Judd is based on a very limited amount of drilling data and only covers an area with a vertical extent of 100 meters to a maximum of 700 meters and a maximum strike of 700 meters. So area-wise, less than 20% of what we have drilled at Kora at this point. Deposit, however, is open in all directions and a major exploration focus going forward, with the majority of our underground drilling rigs targeting Judd this year. In terms of the Judd resource model load wireframes, Left image is a long section, middle image, cross section, right image is a plan view of the geological wireframes. As you can see from the long section, drilling is concentrated around the existing development. Due to the time constraints and with an effective resource date of 31st of December, we didn't have sufficient time to complete significant step-out drilling, which of course we've now got planned for this year, or to follow up on the high-grade areas as we saw them, which are highlighted here in the two red ovals. So, as mentioned, this is going to be a major focus of our drilling going forward. As you'd expect, the measured and indicated is very proximal to the two underground sublevel developments at Judd, and that then surrounded by your inferred. I think, like Kora, at Judd, we observe very favorable grade versus ounces and tonnage curves for both the measured and indicated and inferred, where as the cutoff grade increases, there's a significant drop-off in tonnage, significant increase in grade, but only moderate reduction in total ounces. And so this implies, like Kora, there's operational flexibility to access high-grade mining areas, which we've certainly looked to leverage. And presenting that in tabular form, I think particularly impressive for the measured and indicated 5 gram per ton. The grade increase is 67% from 11 to 18.35, while total ounces reduce only 15%. Inferred resource still requires a lot of drilling, particularly up and down dip, the high-grade development. On the left is a long section of J1, 1.75 gram per ton cutoff, and on the right we've got it at 5 gram per ton cutoff. So you can see Judd, like Kora, has discrete high-grade areas, and we'll certainly plan to leverage our mining plan to exploit these. Exploration at Judd is still very much early days and great potential in every direction. Looking at Judd in cross-section on the right, over 120 meter vertically, you can see considerable continuity of grade. Stoping at Judd, as I mentioned, commenced in Q4 2021 and performed very, very well to date, as shown with the two images. Stope dimension, relatively large, 40 meter strike, 30 meter height, 4.5 to 5 meter. And obviously, as you can see there, held up very well. So looking at production expansion and resource growth opportunities, the core resource and the update and the Maiden Judd resource is certainly set K92 up well for the next two stages of production expansion, while also providing high-grade, large resource base to expand through exploration. So if we now move on to looking at some of that potential. Firstly, on production expansion, we achieved stage 2 run rate in Q4 2021, and we plan to expand again in 2022 with stage 2A, increasing throughput 25% to 500,000 tonnes per annum, and we expect to achieve that late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter of 2022. In terms of stage 3, the updated Kora and Judd resource estimates will provide the basis for the DFS, which is due the first half of 2022. And we're looking to increase our throughput this to 1.2 million tonnes per annum. And we're pleased with the updated resource estimate, which exceeded our 2 million ounce goal for measured and indicated. Importantly, we will also be completing an updated PEA, which will look to bring in the inferred resource and show the potential that provides. Stage 3, the twin incline, is well advanced. The first incline at 933 meters as of the end of January. And after some COVID-related travel and other restrictions were lifted in second quarter 2021, our advance rates have tracked at or above budget. The twin incline, as many would be aware, is significantly oversized simply because we don't know how big these deposits will ultimately be, and we're really just scratching the surface here. So the twin inclines have been designed to handle initially up to 3 million tonnes per annum using trucking, but an ability to go up to an excess of 5 million tonnes with a conveyor system. Looking at our high priority near mine targets, and this slide you'll see actually incorporates some of the results from our recent aerial geophysics. So proximal to underground infrastructure, there are multiple high-grade targets. Being near mine infrastructure, tremendous advantages. Targets can be explored at low cost, and discoveries can be quickly translated into a positive impact, both in mine production and cash flow. As an example, at Judd, we discovered the high-grade underground in Q4 2020 and developed 2 sublevels, and a year later, first long hole stopes before we even had a resource. This discovery has opened up an entirely new production, which definitely gives our operation greater flexibility in the fourth quarter, and will do so going forward. And as I've mentioned previously, we're currently drilling at Kora, Kora South, Judd, and Judd South. We also plan to commence drilling Kora Deeps in the second half of the year from the twin incline as it gets into position. From the Kora South long section that you can see here, I would say there are several key takeaways. Firstly, Kora is open at depth. The deepest drill hole continue to show a well-mineralized system, and as we develop our twin incline at the 900 level, near the bottom of the resource, that will provide us an excellent platform to extend the resource at depth second half of the year. Kora is wide open to the south, with 1 kilometer strike length towards the A1 porphyry. A1, we believe, is the main heat source and is feeding multiple vein systems. Our very first drill hole at Kora South from surface, which was the first ever drilled in the target, delivered very strong results. High grades and solid thicknesses for K1, K2, and K3 veins. 1 to 2 meter massive sulfide veins in K1 and K2 grading over 20% copper. And quite exciting, a dilatant zone incorporating K2, K3, 35.9 meters at 5.98 gram per ton gold equivalent. And that's the widest intersection we've seen at Kora. So from this long section, you can see there is a very strong potential for resource growth. Now, looking at the long section for Judd and Judd South, very similar story to Kora and Kora South. The main difference is that Judd is 3 years behind where we are at Kora. Recall that Kora North was first drilled in May 2017, whereas the Judd high grade drilled from underground fourth quarter 2020. We view Judd as highly prospective and plan for the majority of our underground drilling to be focused on it in 2022. Judd South runs parallel to Kora South and is projected on surface all the way to A1 porphyry, so another kilometer. And like Kora, had never been drilled until the first results that we reported last week. And the results were outstanding. High grades were reported in both J1 and J2 veins. And as you may recall, the Maiden Judd resource is only on the J1 vein. Secondly, discovery of a dilatant zone. And this is approximately 150 meters to the south of previous historic drilling near the surface. A major positive. Over 66 meters at just over 5 gram per ton gold equivalent. This is the widest hole ever recorded at K92. And while this is still very much early days, the dilatant zones at both Judd and Kora have the potential to significantly increase and give us something of a step change in terms of both the Kora and Judd resources. So this slide shows us the cross-section from the first two holes drilled at Kora South and Judd South. As you can see, the dilatant zones are punctuated by high-grade veins with the bonus of having mineralization in between the veins. Hole KUDD 0001 also encountered a previously unknown vein at around 30 meters depth, 75 meters east of Judd, recording 3.45 meters at 10.36 gram per ton gold equivalent. Drilling has never been conducted this far to the east of Judd before, and a program has been designed to test this potentially new vein system, both from surface and from underground. At Kora South and Judd South, there's one rig operating currently. We're about to add a second rig, and we're also looking to add now a third rig. Looking at the lay of the land at Kora South and Judd South, I think it's important to highlight there's very strong vectors on surface, including historical workings, outcrops on both veins extending towards the lithocap at the A1 porphyry, which makes us particularly excited about the potential in this area. So in addition to drilling, we recently completed an advanced mobile MT deep penetrating airborne geophysics program, which was completed in Q4, and that's delivered some really promising results. It's the first major geophysical program flown for over 10 years, and I think it's the biggest in Papua New Guinea for about 20 years. A highlight from the results is the high conductivity zone that extends from Kora and Judd along Kora South, Judd South, and beyond the A1 porphyry for several kilometers. It's shown on the map in long section along the high conductivity zone on the bottom right. Previously, vein exploration was focused west of A1, and this opens up kilometers to the east of the highly prospective terrain. The geophysics also correlated well with known deposits and conductive bodies, and also identified multiple new vein and porphyry targets on all of our licenses. And these new targets will be presented and named in due course. I think it's also important to highlight the highly prospective porphyry potential at K92. Drilling, as many would be aware, at Blue Lake Porphyry continues, leveraging the new information from the geophysics program as well now. The geophysics program, as shown in the previous slide, shows that Blue Lake is among the most potential district of porphyries, but there are others, and there are indications that potentially certainly some of these are all linked. So I'd like to wrap up the presentation with a slide courtesy of BMO Capital Markets, which looked at the relative position of K92 globally after the mineral resource update. BMO looked at companies whose primary list is in North America, Australia, or European stock exchanges, and focused on large plus 5 million ounce gold equivalent assets at high grade, defined as over 6.5 grams per ton gold equivalent for underground and over 3 grams per ton for open pit. Based on this analysis, it's remarkable how rare these deposits are, with only 10 underground projects in total, and most of them owned by senior mining companies. Amongst these deposits, K92 is the third highest grade underground deposit. It's also important to note, I think, that K92 has the lowest cutoff grade of the underground projects. As shown earlier, I think in the presentation, the grade tonnage curves, grade increases significantly at K92 as cutoff grade increases, with only moderate reduction in the total ounces. So with that, I'd like to thank you and now turn it over to the operator for the Q&A session.
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. To join the question queue, you may press star then 1 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a tone acknowledging your request. If you're using a speakerphone, please pick up your handset before pressing any keys. To withdraw your question, please press star then 2. We will pause for a moment as callers join the queue. Our first question is from Ovais Habib with Scotiabank. Please go ahead. Mr. Habib, your line is open, sir. Do you have your phone on mute by chance? Our next question is from Alex Terentiew with Stifel. Please go ahead.
Hey, good morning, guys. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, good. Yep. I just want to make sure I didn't having same issues as OVS was having. Yeah, so look, great to see news out last week and this week. Good to see you guys making some great progress here. So I got a whole bunch of questions. I'll just ask one or two, then I'll jump off and circle back in. But just to start, on the Judd resource, the M&I grade is, as good or better than Kora. But I just wanted to ask, on the inferred resource, I know very limited drilling so far, only 180,000 ounces, but the grade there, 5.66 grams per ton gold equivalent. What's driving that lower grade? Is it the, just drill spacing, just the total number of holes, or are you seeing something different there?
Well, morning. Thanks for the question. Look, I think the reality is that we've got a very limited number of holes right now in Judd. We, as I think everyone is aware, the focus really for the last 18 months, 2 years, has been ramping up the measured and indicated primarily in Kora for the feasibility study. And Judd came very late in the piece. We've got 6 rigs underground drilling right now, and have had, I think, for about the last 6 months, we've had six rigs, having ramped it up from 2 originally. And when you look at the number of holes, I think we've done over 500 holes in Kora, but in Judd we've done, I think now we're up to about 60 holes. I think we've reported about 40 holes. So it's less than 10% of the drilling. We do think that Judd is probably more variable than Kora, but that's an opinion rather than let's say a fact based on a lot of drilling. And the other thing is that we think we can see specific trends where you get higher grade, and the reality is that we've sort of recognized that from the drilling that we've done, and we haven't actually chased that higher grade because we've been very much applying the same criteria, the same method as we have at Kora, which is to basically drill out on the grid pattern. And so where we think, for instance, there is a high grade shoot, if you like, we actually haven't drilled a lot of it. It's evident from the drilling, but we haven't chased it per se. And in fact, it turns out the drilling that we've done, if anything, has avoided those areas, and that's just because we're drilling a grid pattern. So okay. I guess our expectation is that overall, as we do more drilling, we'll bring the inferred up the same as we did at Kora originally. Kora's inferred was significantly lower than the measured and indicated, and certainly the 2 holes that we've drilled going south have probably reinforced that view, and the historical holes which are up at the surface, which actually don't come into the resource, although we could have actually put a resource around the surface holes, also reinforce that view.
Okay,
I don't know
great.
if that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. Just one more question before I jump off. So given that resource drilling is really just starting off here at Judd, and you guys last week identified some very interesting holes, these dilatant zones. I mean, how should we think about that with the upcoming PEA? Is there a chance, or are you guys considering doing a kind of another resource update to be included in that? Especially given how you talked about the dilatant zones, how thick they are. Maybe there's an opportunity for these to be, I wouldn't necessarily say a game changer, but quite significant to the project. So do you want to incorporate those in the PEA, or how do you plan on going forward?
At this point in time, the PEA will just be based on the resource we've just released.
Okay.
We do expect to do an updated resource on both Judd and Kora in about a year's time. And we right now, I think we've got 7 rigs drilling, 6 underground, 1 on the surface. We should have a second rig up on the surface in Kora South next week. And then we're actually busy planning for a third rig to go up on the surface as well at Kora South. So by second quarter, we should have about 9 rigs operating, 6 of those underground. One of those underground will also be drilling what we would call Kora South from underground. We should be by next month. We will have one of the rigs in our most southerly drill cuddy, which will actually be drilling outside of the mining lease and below where we've drilled from surface. So at this point in time, we anticipate sort of this time next year we'll have an updated resource on both Judd and Kora, and we'll have to figure out what we do with that. Do we put it into an updated PEA or whatever? And I guess that'll probably be the case.
Okay, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Our next question is from Don DeMarco with National Bank Financial. Please go ahead.
Well, hi, good morning, everyone. A couple questions. First off, at Kora, so the M&I copper grades are up 50%, and we saw that the recent Kora South drilling is showing some copper intercepts that are exceeding 20%. So can you comment on the copper grade trends, both for this infill drilling at Kora, for that step-out drilling to Kora South, and talk about maybe where you expect the heat sources might be, and whether we would expect this trend of copper grades to increase with step-out drilling? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Look, I mean, we've always said as you go south, it appears that the copper grades are picking up. The other point being that K1 has always been where we've mined primarily in the northern part of it. K1 tends to be lower in copper, and K2 is higher in copper. So if you look at the very first hole we ever drilled, which was KMDD 0008, it was over 10 gram per ton gold and almost 1% copper. Meanwhile, and that was K2. Meanwhile, K1 that we went through there was before it picked up grade, but you're running at about 0.3, 0.2, 0.3% copper. As we go south, we do see overall a trend in higher copper. And if you look at the original inferred resource at Kora, which was sort of 700 meters, 500 to 700 meters to the south of where we put that first hole in, the historical original resource at Kora was running at 2.1% copper. So, and that was to the south. We've only drilled really one hole so far into Kora to the south, and obviously the copper has picked up more. So it really reinforces our view that the copper grades appear to pick up going to the south, both in K1 and in K2, and potentially there in K3 as well. The view has always been, and I think our initial results from drilling to the south and our geophysics that we've just recently flown really reinforce the idea that the A1 porphyry is the heat source for Kora and potentially for Maniape and Atakompa as well. And I think that we showed that in the release, and obviously you saw it in the presentation there. And it's also sort of indicating that maybe there's a larger system, and in fact that even Blue Lake is part of that larger system. But certainly right now our view from the geophysics and from the recent drilling is that A1 headwater is the heat source, and obviously as you move towards the heat source, your expectation is to see higher copper.
Okay, great. And certainly the copper was important in offsetting the gold grades easing a little bit in the Kora M&I. So can you talk about that too? I think they eased to maybe 7.6 grams per ton from 9 plus. Was that partly a function of the depletion, or was there other factors involved there too?
Yeah, look, if you look at the M&I and you put back in the ounces that we took out from, and I'm talking specifically Kora, not Judd, you go up to about 9.8 grams per ton, and that is driven primarily by, gold equivalent, and that is driven by the higher grades that we mined in gold from that area, and that we mined significantly more K1 than K2. So again, that would also drive an increase, if you like, slight increase in the copper grades as well, because you've depleted more of K1 than K2, and so you've depleted gold, higher grades, and you've depleted copper, lower grades. So that's certainly a driving factor.
Okay, got it. That's good. And maybe just a final quick question. For the PEA that's coming up, what throughput rate would you consider?
Yes. Look, the base is 1.2 million tons per annum, because that's obviously what's going into the feasibility study. That forms the base, and then we're looking at whether or not within that context it drives bringing back in to operation the existing plant. So the feasibility study is based on a brand new 1.2 million ton per annum plant. We put the existing plant, which currently is 400,000 ton per annum, but will shortly be a 500,000 ton per annum capacity. That goes on care and maintenance. Certainly in the PEA, we'll look at whether that's justified to bring that back into production after the first couple of years of 1.2. But right now we haven't got a view on that, because we're not far enough into the PEA. We're busy doing the feasibility study, mine design right now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. That's all for me.
Thanks.
Our next question is from Craig Stanley with Raymond James. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First off, the host rock, does it extend to the east side of A1?
Yes.
Any work been done over that way?
No, nothing.
Okay. Secondly, you talked about, netting out the actual mining depletion from these resource estimates. So for Judd, that was around 25,000 ounces. I assume, was that all taken then in Q4? So that means like you guys reported production of 36,000 ounces. So 25 of that was then from Judd.
No, about plus or minus 60%, I think, was taken in Q4, and the rest of it was Q2, Q3, as we developed the two, the 1235 and 1265 drives. So when we talk that grade is obviously the diluted grade, and the drives were going through at 5.5 meters, whereas the stopes, as you would see from the photograph in the presentation, were taken out at around 3.5, 4 meters. So stopes obviously came out at higher grade than the drives, which were diluted.
My last question is surface drilling on the exploration license, so just south of the mining license, where you reported those first two results last week. Are there any plans to turn the rigs around and come at the veins from the opposite direction? Because they are steeply different. The reality is that one hole goes, there is.
what we've seen certainly from that that hole where we picked up another vein 75 meters to the east of Kora is that there is still potential for parallel or sub-parallel vein systems. We see that certainly 400 meters off to the west in Karempe, and in drilling Karempe, we saw that there were a number of parallel vein systems. So in fact, the plan in the future is to drill Karempe, for instance, from underground, and to develop out towards it, and that development itself by going perpendicular to the strike of Kora and Judd becomes an exploration, if you like, development in that it potentially goes through other parallel vein systems. So there have been a couple of holes that were drilled originally at Kora from surface that actually did drill from different directions, and we've also got people up on the ground doing mapping and all the rest of it. But there is quite, strangely enough, it's a mountain, but there is a lot of cover up there as well. So you don't necessarily get outcrop that you might expect, because it's not a rocky style of mountain, if you like. This is the tropics, and therefore there's been a lot of erosion, there's a lot of cover. So drilling kicks up things that you don't expect, which is great. And what it does show is there is and that's why the aerial geophysics is so important, because it does show you corridors that you should be targeting, which is what we are doing. And those corridors also quite clearly show you Maniape and Arakompa, for instance, off to the east, and that structure going off to the east. So they are going to be focus points for us going forward. No two ways about it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Our next question is from Andrew Mikitchook with BMO Capital Markets. Please go ahead.
Congratulations, John, and to you and your team. Just two quick questions. Number one, to what degree does your infill drilling experience shown that you're able to expand or better defined areas of higher grade? And can we infer whether this can be, or could this then extrapolate into the large areas of inferred on the K1, K2 veins that haven't seen anything near the denseness of drilling required to get to MNI? They potentially regain or define, maybe more accurately define, more high grades.
Yeah, look, good question. This is very much a work in progress, although it's 500 odd holes and counting, I think. We do think that there is that we can see the higher grade trends, and for instance, with the twin incline coming in at the 900 RL or thereabouts, and coming in under Aruma Fimpa. Certainly, some of our guys have a view that there's a high grade zone that actually goes down and trends down from what would that be, south to north, and that trend potentially goes down and underneath Rumafimpa. And that whole area has obviously never been tested, and so there is, we think, some very good potential to extend Kora to the north at depth. That's in part based on an interpretation that we do have higher grade shoots, if you like, that generally trend from south to north, south at surface, north down dip. But it is still a work in progress. And same thing with Judd. As I mentioned earlier, we think we're seeing the same sort of trend, but as you know, with the geology, once you get an idea in your head, you can start generating information that supports your view, and so we're quite cognizant of that and not trying to sort of fit it into, if you like, an idea that is the case. But certainly, I think most of our guys believe that we do see some higher grade trends, and would argue that they have been able to predict a given hole would be higher grade than another hole.
Okay.
Yeah, although often, of course, we say after the event rather than before the event. I knew that was going to be a high-grade hole. I knew that wasn't going to be as high-grade. But I think overall, we're reasonably confident that yes, there are the high-grade and low-grade zones, and that we're starting to see a picture there.
Okay, and then my second question is just trying to extend today's resource into the upcoming feasibility. The mineable shape optimizer was run at, looking at these footnotes here, 5.5 grams on the PEA. Is that at all, sorry, that's gold equivalent, 5.5 grams. Is that at all apples to apples with the cutoffs you put in your tables this morning? Or is even that benchmark of 5.5 grams to be significantly reviewed here for the feasibility, just so that
the feasibility study is not being set up on a 5.5. The feasibility study is establishing its own criteria in that area. So
so we shouldn't use 5.5 as a starting point. That's not what people should be expecting.
No.
There's going to be a redone and entirely new mine plan.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we said when we did the original PEA at 1 million tons per annum was that it dropped out 4 million tons at around 4 gram per ton. That actually made you money, but in the original PEA, you're being driven by simple financial criteria of maximizing NPV5, and that doesn't necessarily optimize your mining of the deposit. And so we would look at bringing that to account, and that's certainly something that we're doing in the feasibility study. I think it's important to remember in the feasibility study that you can only focus on the measured and indicated. In the ideal world, of course, we'd have drilled out the entire known deposit, which we think is actually a small part of what potentially the deposit is, but we would have drilled out the entire 5 million ounces at measured and indicated and put that into the feasibility study. We can't do that. Well, we could, but it would be sitting here for another couple of years waiting to complete a feasibility study, and we wouldn't be optimizing the financial performance of the deposit, because we'd sit at the current throughput rate while we drilled, and quite frankly, we could be drilling here for the next 20 years to come up with now here is the optimized view of what we should do, and we'd have wasted 10 years or 15 years or whatever the number is of higher throughput. So the nature of the deposit is that it'll be developed in stages. That's our view, and that's what we've done to date. We've had stage 1, we've had stage 2, we've got stage 2A now happening, we've got stage 3, and we honestly believe that there will be a stage 4 and probably a stage 5, and that'll be based on, extending our drilling, and at no point should you be constraining it by your original views of, for instance, cutoff. I mean, you go to 1.2 million tons per annum, there's your MSO might be 4, whatever that figure is. You go to 2.5 million, you'll drive it down again because you'll be obviously getting the economies of scale from your underground, and we have built that in to a large degree in our design of the twin incline, which I think is looking more and more that the conservative design that we put in to give ourselves capacity to do a stage 4 and even a stage 5 and maybe even a stage 6. I think it's starting to show that was the correct decision.
Thanks for that detail. I'll step back and let others follow up with questions.
Thanks, Andrew.
Our next question is from Rausa Profiti with 8 Capital. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for taking my questions. I have 2 of them, if I can, John. Firstly, with respect to Stage 3 DFS and the upcoming PEA, and in the context of your commentary on more selective mining, would you say the opportunities are evident earlier in the mine plan for more selectivity later in the mine plan, or is this something we should think about as an opportunity that's evenly distributed throughout the mine strategy?
Well, I think in relation to the DFS, you're obviously very focused on the 1200 level and 200 meters basically vertically either side of that, because that's where we've been able to focus our drilling from underground in terms of measured and indicated, and you're pretty much going to take out that whole area. We are, if anything, looking at the potential within some of those areas, and that was shown in the presentation, where we could be taking out, I think the widest intersection that we've seen is about 26 meters, where it takes in K1, K-Link, and K2. So there's actually potential within the areas that we've got measured and indicated to actually be taking out quite substantial stopes, and part of what we're looking at is the potential to take out that entire zone. So we're certainly not intending to be selective and leaving material behind. Obviously, because we've got development along the entire strike, we do have some ability to look at our planning to make sure that we've got higher grades coming out earlier in the piece, so that we're maximizing NPV. So from that perspective, yes, you have some ability to do some selective mining, if you like, but to date, pretty much, we haven't left behind any areas and said, well, they don't meet our criteria, and they don't make sense to mine. They don't make money. Everything that we've done, we've gone along. We're able to mine. The entire strike, and of course, we will be. Right now, we're backfilling stopes with waste rock, but we are moving or we will be moving to a paste fill. Paste fill plant has been designed, and that'll be one of the first things that's going in. Will actually be the paste fill, so that we can be backfilling those stopes, and again, that gives us a little bit more flexibility in our mine scheduling.
Okay, yep, that's helpful. And my second question, you did in your preamble commentary talk about bulk mining opportunities, and are you looking at sort of a singular operating stope strategy incorporating, say, K1, K2 plus the dilatant zones? How far are we away from that body of work being looked into, and what's your current thinking on that approach?
Wow, yeah. Look, right now, our view is primarily long hole stoping K1, K2 separately. Some areas you may still do cut and fill, and then Judd long hole stoping as well. As I said, there's certainly areas right now where part of what we're looking at in the study is a more bulk mining type opportunity. It's still very early days to the south. Obviously, the mining guys are pretty excited by what they've seen, but it's really, really early days. We've only got a couple of holes in there. We do have the third hole, which I guess is probably, better not talk about the third hole. It's certainly on people's mind. Let's put it that way. That whole bulk mining, but it's still really, really early days, especially to the south. You've only got a couple of holes, but yeah, it's certainly on the radar.
Okay. Yeah. No, I understand the early nature of what you're saying. So thanks. I appreciate your answers, John.
Thanks for that.
Our next question is from Mike Fairbairn with Canaccord Genuity. Please go ahead.
Morning, everyone, and thanks for taking my question. Just one from me on the inferred grade at Kora. If we normalize the cutoff grades and take a look at the inferred grades, they actually came down quite a bit from the prior resource estimate. Just wondering if you can give any color as to why this was. Was it a function of higher grade material being converted to M&I, or is there any reinterpretation of existing information?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. I think first off, you have converted some of that higher grade material into measured and indicated. So that's certainly an element of what you have. I think in addition to that, we brought in areas to the north which would probably be lower grade that perhaps weren't in there in the past, because you get into the extremity of the deposit. And of course, our whole thing is to grid drill on a grid basis, especially with the relation to the inferred. So we don't see it as, if you like, an indication of overall reduction in our expectation of the deposit. The reality is that we haven't really extended the resource at all to the south in this update. We haven't extended Kora much at all. So therefore, if you like, some of our best potential as we see it is actually going to the south, and we really haven't done anything at all on that in terms of bringing that into the resource. That's certainly going to be the focus together with Judd over the next few years. So that would be my thing. It's a combination of, we have taken out some of that higher grade that's gone into measured and indicated. We've also pushed the resource a bit to the north, which was always anticipated, quite frankly, to be a lower grade, but it's also about closing off your deposit and understanding your deposit, not just chasing grade.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you.
Our next question is from Geordie Mark with Haywood Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, g'day, John. You might have missed a few things there. I just got kicked off earlier. But yeah, just coming in and picking up on a few things there. And you mentioned you obviously had the dilational sort of wider zones intersected last week, or presented last week, that showed potential for broader style stoping or some other method. And you were talking about the potential of link zone and coming to play for exploiting the resource and the different width, at least, within the current resource envelope. I mean, can you give it a sort of an idea, at least holistically, what the potential strike length of system you have there that could be exploited in maybe a transverse stoping method or something different that you've already defined, including our K1 link and K2, and at least from a sort of a high level point of view, whether the dilatant zone, particularly on Kora, I guess, identified to the south, looks similar to what you're seeing at K1 link, etc. Just trying to get an idea of what that intervening material or intervening material that are bound by K1 and K2 sort of vein sets that you intersected last week that look like relative to what you see within the deposit already. And I've got a few other questions thereafter.
Okay, thanks, Geordie. Yeah, look, first off, the K1, K-link, K2, as I think one of the slides in the presentation showed, it has a vertical extent that can run into 100 to 200 meters. Strike-wise, we've picked up K-link over 300 meters. We originally had a K-link 1, K-link 2, K-link 3, and then sort of realized it was a bit more sort of consistent, if you like, that in fact you've just got a K-link structure. And when you look at overall, I think it's 5 or 6% of the resource is actually in the link structure. So it's not a major part of it, but there is certainly that area where it is pretty consistent, and it does require us to really look very carefully at a wider stoping regime. We need more drilling in it, and it is one of the things that we're going to be focused on in the next 12 to 18 months in the context of Kora, is tighter drilling around that link area. And it's the question of that dilatant zone to the south is a really, really good question, because it's the question we're asking ourselves. The evidence from the core says it looks different from what we see in the link structure, which I guess we see as when we look at the link structure, you've got zones that have opened up, and you've had the fluids coming through and providing, obviously, mineralization. The dilatant zone looks different bearing in mind that we've only got 2 holes, but both of which are actually showing dilatant zones, one in and around Kora and one in and around Judd. So whether they are a continuous feature, whether they are a localized feature, is still too early to say. They don't structurally look the same as the link structure, but to be honest, it's really early days. So we can't honestly say that we have a specific view, if you like, that it's a repetition, if you like, of the link zone. Right now, geologically, it looks different, and of course, the copper is an entirely different feature that we don't really see in the link zones. So, it's different also from that perspective, and I think there's a photo of some of the copper, some of the chalco that it is in the release I think we put out last week. And I have to say, when you see it, and I've literally I've just come up to Vancouver after 4 weeks in PNG and obviously some time on site. When you see that in the core, it's bloody impressive. It really is, and yeah, you can't help but get pretty excited when you see it. Yeah, look, gold is worth a lot of money and all the rest of it, but damn, chalco, when you see it over meters and meters in core, gets you pretty excited.
Very true. Thanks, John. Yeah, certainly looking at last week's data and sub-interval data, there seem to be at least 2 populations of geochemical data that showed high copper relationship with high silver and low gold, and high gold with the lower parts of copper and silver. Still good grades, but there seem to be 2 populations of data that you could tease out. Is there a difference? Are you seeing a different geological evolution or multiple overprints to present that high grade copper silver in the holes to the south versus what you see in the north? Or it's too early to tell, or any information there?
Look, I think it's probably too early to tell. I mean, you're right. There's definitely overprint. Oh, definitely. We're talking geology. You can't be definite on anything because we weren't around then. But it certainly looks like there is different events. So you've got that overprinting. Certainly, we interpret that you're getting closer to the source, and in a couple of the holes at depth as well within Kora, within the mining lease, we've seen, for instance, evidence of bornite, which of course would be suggesting you're getting towards the source, and that drilling is as we've gone further south and at depth. So, that it's not necessarily that you're simply looking at it from the context of going to the south, you're getting closer to the source, and therefore you've got more copper, which is perhaps a simplistic view. But you may have multiple sources, if you like. I mean, one source, but you may have multiple entry points where that mineralization has come in, not simply along strike, but also coming at depth. And I think it is still early days. I mean, we're looking at getting at least a couple of PhD students looking at different aspects of the deposit. And I suspect we could get half a dozen. Just who could all be doing some really interesting work on this. Yeah.
Okay, maybe just one last one on a holistic, looking at the system holistically now and the drilling that's gone in and the extent you can see to the south and the potential given from the broad physical data that you've presented. Where are you positioned, you think, in terms of when you're looking at the current feasibility and then scalability and, as you said, 4, 5, maybe 6, in terms of the capacity in place for the drive development you're doing, nominally up to 3, I guess, but maybe that's going to be revisited, 3 million tonne per annum. And in terms of what you can do for plant footprint and, not putting yourself in a corner in terms of limiting capacity or capacity growth. Can you speak to that a little bit? And that's it from me.
Okay. Look, I think where we're sitting is we are feeling right now probably a little bit vindicated. I know a couple of people questioned why we were putting in a 5 by 5.5 and a 6 by 6.5, given the resource that we had. I think it's. I think now that's shown to be the right decision. Ultimately, it may be oversized, but because we've only got a feasibility that's going to look at 1.2 million tonnes per annum, and at 1.2 million tonnes per annum, yeah, the twin incline is oversized. We've done some very prelim work on it and believe we can get at least 5 million tonnes per annum out of it. So it's got potential to be 4 times at least what we're currently allowed for. So the twin incline, I think, is we're pretty happy with where we're sitting in that. We've actually got our first raise bore is scheduled to start late Q3, early Q4. Putting in a vent shaft to the south. I think it's going to be about 700 meters, 600 to 700 meters. Be the biggest, it'll be a 5 meter diameter, biggest raise bore I think it's been done in PNG. Not big by Canadian or Australian standards, but by PNG standards, it's a fair one. In terms of the plant footprint, important point is that where the plant is and where the tailings dam and the offices and all the rest of it, we're actually in the Markham Valley, and where we are is around 20 kilometers wide. It's pretty flat. So we've got all the real estate that we need to expand. And in fact, the plant itself that we're looking at right now is a sag ball configuration with the design such that we can basically add a second ball and push the throughput to double what's there right now. So 1.2 being able to double it to 2.4. And that has been one of the criteria that we've put on the plant design, is an ability to basically double that throughput. And of course, you've still got sitting there the existing plant. It will be right next to the existing plant. In terms of other things like tailings dam, there's multiple places where we can put new tailings dams eventually. Although the design is that we will be putting 60% plus of our material back underground as paste fill, which obviously reduces the footprint, the environmental footprint of what we're doing. It's a float plant and gravity plant, so there's no cyanide. It's pretty benign, and yet we get incredibly good recoveries. I mean, metallurgically, this stuff is best I've seen, certainly in terms of response to flotation / gravity. We're running right now at sort of 92, 93%, and think with the plant design we can tweak that and get a little bit more out of it. People often don't sort of focus and recognize these issues. You spend a hell of a lot of money getting your ore out and getting it to surface, but a 1 or 2 percentage point difference on your metallurgy is pretty significant. And for a float plant to be sitting where we're sitting and an expectation of 92 to 95% recovery is pretty bloody good. So that's an important aspect. But yeah, we think we could comfortably get to 5 million with the infrastructure that we're putting in right now, and then potentially beyond that even. Thanks.
Once again, if you have a question, please press star then 1 on your telephone. Our next question is from Alex Terentiew with Stifel. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hey guys, sorry, just one quick follow-up. Just COVID these days, obviously there was a big challenge for everybody, especially you guys in 2021. What are you seeing in country right now, and how is it, if at all, impacting your guys' operations and your ability to execute primarily on the phase 3 expansion?
Sorry, COVID.
Yeah, just curious, if there's any new wave or.
No, I'm only kidding, Alex. I'm only kidding. No.
Okay.
I arrived later than I intended into Vancouver because I got COVID while I was in PNG. So okay. And they seem to have this thing they're concerned about you getting on a plane if you've got a positive PCR, so you have to wait until you get a negative one. Look, Omicron is in PNG, and we are currently in an Omicron surge. It's been surprising in many ways to a lot of people that, given we've got a very low vaccination rate in PNG, it's about 3%. Within the mine, we're running at about 50% of our people are fully vaxxed, and another 17% on top of that, I think, have got a single vax. So we've been very successful at getting our people vaccinated. We are seeing an increase in COVID right now, and it not just operationally, but we're seeing it throughout the country, and we certainly expected that to be the case. The general view is this Omicron surge is going to be going through until the end of March. One of the things that I did while I was in PNG was I did the official opening of the COVID isolation facility center that we built up in Goroka with the provincial government. We're in the Eastern Highlands province. Goroka is the capital of the Eastern Highlands, and that's where the mine is. We put $1 million kina, it's about $350,000 into a modification of an existing facility to make it into an isolation facility. I went up there and did the official opening with the governor. So we're doing our bit in relation to COVID. We've so far put in 2.5 million kina to government for COVID mitigation, which is almost $1 million. And we've got a lot of recognition and for that within the country. We certainly, when we gave our guidance was quite wide, and it was quite wide because we weren't sure what the impact will be of COVID going forward. it certainly appears that COVID hasn't been as serious in PNG as it has in many other countries, and there's a lot of discussion and speculation on why that would be, and things like the demographics, where you've got a very young population, you've got a population that generally doesn't have access to pharmaceutical drugs, so therefore they've got a higher natural resistance to infection. You've also got the prevalence of malaria, and therefore a lot of natural resistance to that sort of thing. All of these things appear to be contributing to the impact perhaps being less than we've seen in Western countries. And of course, the counter to that is that may well be also contributing towards the lack of vaccination, is that it's not as serious as it has been in many countries. We do believe that it will continue to impact on us, certainly the first half of the year. And right now, we still operate in a situation where we basically quarantine anyone before they come to site for a week, and we do testing of them, and once they've been in quarantine for a week and negative, they can come onto site.
Okay.
Our plan at this point in time is April. We will start easing that, dropping it first of all from 7 days to 3 or 4 days, and then ultimately dropping it out entirely. We've already got our systems in place that say it's about whether or not you have got symptoms, rather than saying, if you're positive, then this is what we're going to do. We're now moving towards that. Okay, do you have symptoms, and looking at it more as it's just one of those other things that you have to manage, rather than try and totally keep off site, which we've been able to do very successfully. So we do expect to have it on site. It is, in fact, we've got some cases on site right now, but it's something that we believe we can manage. But it will give us hiccups. We certainly expect, especially in the first half of the year, our expectation is that it will give us some issues, and we're just going to have to manage those. You've also got this whole thing of the supply chain, et cetera, and we've certainly seen the impact in the supply chain. We've just had a new twin boom jumbo arrive on site. That actually should have been in last quarter. We've got a loader and a truck, I think, coming in. Our crusher for the expansion to 500,000 tons per annum is now arrived in country. But again, it's over a month later than it should have been, and it's all part of that supply chain issue. We have had to increase the amount of materials stocks that we have on site quite significantly over the last 2 years. Just recognizing that there is that impact in the supply chain, and therefore you need to hold more things, more stock on site. So you've got an impact there as well. I mean, I think we increased our stocks by 10% over the last couple of months alone.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I understand. Okay, no, that's a good update. Thank you.
Our next question is from Miles Kilaki with Agentis Capital. Please go ahead.
Hi, John. Congrats on the milestone, and thank you for the color on all of the previous questions that have been asked. Much appreciated. I'd like to start by confirming, I may have missed this if it was asked previously, should we be expecting an updated resource estimate at Judd by the end of the year?
We'll certainly have an update on the resource. I would think probably the first quarter next year.
Okay. Thank you. And if I may, secondarily, you could provide some additional color on that new vein discovery announced in last week's news release, potential implications that have been interpreted to the north and south?
The color was it was a sort of a coppery color in the main part, I think, Mike, which is probably the charcoal. Oh, you weren't talking literally. Okay. Yeah. Look. Yeah. The guys are. It's a debate every day on this, and you know, you're drilling up on top of the mountain, and every day guys want to see the photo of what the core looked like, etc., for hole number 3. You know, what does that mean? We got 2 holes. We've got dilatant zones in both of those holes, but it is still really, really early days. I think yeah, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of excitement, certainly, in the company, because we you know, we can obviously see the potential that's there, and it's not evident on a lot of the surface because it's got cover, and yeah, I think at this point in time we really look at it as it's early days yet. We need to get that second rig. We need to get the third rig up there. The new vein that we identified, 3.45 meters at over 10 gram per ton gold equivalent. Even underground now, we're on the most southern drill cuddy, which is just being finished right now. We're targeting to when we're drilling to get through Judd and push that 100 meters plus past Judd to really start understanding, is there continuity in that vein? So it's you know, things like that are getting us to rethink what we're doing even underground. And surface wise, yeah, we're, as I said, looking second rig. I'm hoping we'll have by the end of the month, and third rig in the next quarter. So we'll have 3 rigs working up there. So there's a real focus in that Kora South area to really start putting in the meters and seeing what exactly we've got. So early days, color is rosy, would be my best.
Thank you very much, Sean. That's all from me.
Once again, if you have a question, please press star then 1 on your telephone. There are no further questions registered at this time. I would like to turn the conference back over to John Lewins for any closing remarks.
Thank you for that, operator. Look, I guess takeaways in many ways are, okay, it's an update. Here we are at a point in time. It's a pretty good point in time. You know, we've got 2.5 million ounces of measured and indicated, another 2.6 or whatever it is of inferred totally in our deposit. So we are happy with where we've got to, but we recognize that we're just at a point in time. And the more we drill, the more we know. And we have got a heck of a lot of drilling ahead of us. And we're pretty excited by that. We've got a feasibility study that's now going to come out based on the resource. And again, we could we could sit and wait another 2 years to do the feasibility study, and it would look different to what we're going to do right now. But we've always taken the view that this deposit has got so much potential that you have to develop in stages, and that's been our approach, and that will continue to be our approach, and to do that within the context of quite frankly, using the cash that we're generating to expand our project. We've been able to do that very successfully, we think, over the last 3 years, and that's where we're going to continue to do. We've got 9 rigs, 10 rigs operating, generating data, and they're going to continue to operate, and if anything, expand. So we got a lot of information that will be continuing to come out from the drill bit, which will be mainly focused over the next couple of years on expansion of resource rather than bringing up more and more measured and indicated. So it's a point in time. I'd say it's early in the story, and you know, many of the people on the call, the analysts on the call, I would say have recognized that potential, have written about that potential, and we're starting to see some of the results coming out, which vindicate, I think, the position that many analysts have taken on the deposit, on the company, and we're certainly intending to keep delivering, and you know, we really appreciate the interest this morning, and thank you for that. We'll keep doing what we do, and hopefully keep delivering to the market. So thanks, everyone.
This concludes today's conference call. You may disconnect your lines. Thank you for participating, and have a pleasant day.